Good morning. Good to have you join us today. How you feeling? You feeling good? You feel as good as I do? The sun will be out, so we're going to have our meeting here till the sun comes out, and then you're free to go. I want to welcome, now let's see if I can figure this out here. There we go. We got to thank our wonderful host here who have provided this wonderful auditorium, and please do what you can to keep it clean, and because they don't have the custodians come in here during the weekend, so we need it spick and span, leave it the way it was when you came in. If you're interested in other facilities, they're out the back door and down the hall to your left. It's quite a walk, but I think you need the exercise anyway. Okay, here are the guys that make this place work. There are 9 of them. We got an opening for a 10th if you want to volunteer. Lyle's with his grandchildren. That's counts number 1. And we got Jim here, Gene, and I'm the guy, George Johnson, director on the board and also conducting the program. So if you think of a speaker that you might want to suggest to me, let me know after the meeting. We're putting together our calendar for next year. And we got Bill Manning back there, who's also an expert on active surveillance. And we got John Tassi. Where are you, John? John's way in the back there. He's the guy that does our website. He's our webmaster. There he is. Okay. And then Bill Bailey. Now, Bill Bailey is a 3-threat guy. He is he hauls the literature and stacks it up here, and also he is going to be a speaker. And then he's going to pass some baskets too. So he gets a triple salary compared to the rest of us. And then we got Bill Prendergast. Bill, raise your hand here. Excuse me, Steve. There we go. Sorry for the name change. He's a double threat guy. He not only does the newsletters, but he's one of our speakers today. And then we got Bill Lewis. Is Bill here? It'd be interesting how he's going to do a summary of our talk, because that's normally what he does for the newsletter. And then we got Jim. Jim's the guy with the smile and the stack of handouts for you. So those newcomers, you got the yellow page there. Fill it out for us. Okay. Everyone here is a volunteer. The salary is lousy, but the benefits are wonderful. So if you're interested in joining us, please see me. Okay, we got this newcomer package that was handed out, and I want you to fill out the cover sheet. And anybody need a cover sheet? Please fill it out and bring it up front here. Okay, that cover sheet, Gene will review it and give you a phone call. See if you got any questions, things that you would like to ask about our program. And now here comes Bill Manning, and okay. Boy, the talent we got here is fantastic. Okay, and it's got a lot of good information in it. Okay, what's the purpose of this group? Why are you here? I hope you get the message. We're here to help you become your own case manager. You have to manage your case. Your doctor will not. He has thousands of patients. He's got about 10, 15 minutes for you. And it's up to you to keep a record, get a copy of every lab report. I suggest you put it in a 3-ring notebook. And our speakers today have done that. That's why they're able to give a talk about what's going on with them, because they keep track. Many of you plot your PSA, and you know whether it's rising or not, and you'll know your doubling time, some key measures of it. I suggest you take that notebook with you when you go see your doctor. He's going to say, this guy is really serious about his disease, and he might be even more helpful and attentive. But we're not a substitute for your doctor. We're not recommending any treatment or any prescriptions or things like that. But what we hope we do is we raise some questions that you may want to ask your doctor. Like, how about this, and how about that, and why not this, and what are the side effects, and what are the options, things like that. Good questions for you to ask your doctor, but we're not a substitute, and certainly not a substitute for our speakers are not here how to handle your case, but they're very knowledgeable about their own, as you will find out. Okay, what do we do for you? We got this website. We got the books down here, fantastic collection of the latest and best books on prostate cancer. And we got DVDs of previous speakers or previous conferences. And some are for loan for a month and bring it back, others for sale at a tremendous discount. But we still make a little money on the side of it, so that's why I encourage you to buy them. We have a newsletter, and Steve is our editor of that. He has a wonderful sense of humor. He throws in a few cartoons that he thinks are funny. Let us know if you agree. And very informative, and that's the intent of it. So read that every month. And then we have an outreach program. We have brochures out in front. These brochures are not just for you, but for your buddies. You guys have buddies the same age, and they should be getting a PSA. And suggest you grab some of these and take it to some of your meetings and pass it out. And if not, and hopefully tell the story about our support group. We want you to be very active in promoting new members and encouraging getting a PSA. You know, the key thing about PSA is it's for early detection. If you don't want early detection, and if you want late detection, don't get a PSA. Because by the time you wait for the side effects, pain and bleeding, it may be too late. Or you could have cut it off much earlier. Monthly meetings, here's the next month's meeting. And Brent Rose, he's the assistant to A.J. Munt. And he's a bright young doctor that's into new technology, and he's going to share with us next month some of the new developments and some things that he's working on. So you don't want to miss that. Okay, now, I just want to maybe go ahead here. Okay, here we go. If we're going to support you, we need your support. We need your money. We need the money to provide the funds to support our operation. So we're a nonprofit, so you get to declare a tax deduction. And we're also not affiliated with any medical group or that kind of activity. And so dig deep. Some people ask what they should donate. And do you know what a movie costs now? And a 3D movie, you know what that costs? We got guys in 3D, so you don't have to wear glasses to see it. So think of that. We like bills with zeros on it. So if you got $10, toss it in the basket, and we'd appreciate whatever amount that you want to donate. It's certainly appreciated, and keeps us alive and well. Okay, now we're going to do our survey, and this is for our newcomers, and I'd like you to raise your hand when it's appropriate. How many are here for the first time? Raise your hand, please. Now, you guys welcome, and hey, thank you for coming, and you old-timers, look around and say howdy and talk to them afterwards. They're here for a reason, and you can provide some insights and comfort to them. How many have been recently diagnosed in the last 6 months? Okay, so keep in mind, our title of our group is Informed Prostate Cancer Support Group, so we hope you get informed here. And how many have had prostate cancer for up to 1 year? Okay, not that many. Now let's see how many hands come up as we go up in the years. How many have had prostate cancer up to 4 years? Not that many. All right. 5 to 10 years. Now look at those hands. So you newcomers, look at that. And 11 to 15 years, raise your hand. And, okay, anybody go higher than 15? Okay, how many? 30 years. 30 years. Anybody beat that? Thank you. You get to come back for free next month as a grand award. I got 19 years, and so it worked for me, and I know it works for you. And keeping a positive attitude. That's the whole purpose of this program, is to build a positive attitude, encouragement, and ability to accept what you cannot change. Okay, we're going to do a treatment survey. This is for the newcomers who are interested in what kind of treatment might be good. So first off, who has not had treatment yet but is on active surveillance? Raise your hand. We got quite a few. Look at that. That grows every time. We're delaying treatment for a good reason, because you don't have the side effects. How many have had prostate surgery of all kinds? Look at that. That was the gold standard. Now let's see if the new one comes up. How many have had radiation of all kinds? See, a few more. That's the newer treatment. Now some of you have had both. So raise your hand each time we take off one of these things. How many have been on or are on now ADT, what we call hormone therapy? That's what I'm on. Yeah. And then how many are on chemotherapy? 1, 2, 3. He used to be John. Raise your hand. Okay. 4. Okay. New treatments. How many are on some of the new treatments? Provenge, Zytiga, Xtandi? Not that many. That's a little puzzling. How many treatments are you on now? You take anything else?
Hormone therapy.
Okay.
Just had a round of radiation therapy in December. I've been on Xtandi now for about 2 years. And it's kind of holding back the training.
Okay.
The PSA is still going up.
Gene, what have you been on in your technology?
And Zytiga. I'm still on Lupron and Xtandi, and I'm currently added to that Keytruda. So it's essentially every possible treatment available except Zytiga and chemo. So been through all of them, and my PSA is 0.08.
And yeah, he's a happy camper. Okay. How many have had recurrence after their first treatment? There's a lot of us that have. That's the story here, because what we're doing is we're living longer, and the stuff is working, and then fortunately there's new stuff that's coming along. I had recurrence. I was good for 10 years and stopped getting my PSA because, hey, I don't need to. And after 2 years, PSA went to 14. Wow, that was really devastating emotionally for me. Until that's why I joined this group, and it really helped me in terms of my attitude and perseverance. Okay, how many are undecided what to do next? I'm undecided too. There's a bunch of us, and that's why we're here in part to learn more about what's coming up and what works. Okay, we have 6 principles in managing your case. One is early detection. I've already mentioned that. Ignore the task force. It doesn't encourage it. We're very adamant about it. For example, I had my PSA tested when I was beyond the range. I was over 75. They don't recommend it after 70. I went and got it and found that was essential, and that saved my life. We got high definition diagnostics. That's very important because that leads to the ability to do targeted biopsy, rather than what is so predominant down here in San Diego is the systematic 12 course that really are random and not targeted. It may hit the tumor, it may not. Well, the targeted looks for the tumor. Know your Gleason score, because that score is very impactful on what kind of treatment that you're going to go on, particularly active surveillance. If you got a 6, go in active surveillance. And treatment selection then is very important if you know your Gleason score. What we have today is we have 3 speakers, and some will touch on early detection or maybe too late, not too late, but late detection, the diagnostics that they went through, how important the Gleason score is, and they'll tell you about that. Active surveillance, and one of our speakers thinks that maybe he should have gone off active surveillance and had radiation earlier than waiting beyond that. So, and then the treatment selection is very important to all our speakers. So here's today's agenda. We're going to start off with a few words from Gene, and then we're going to have a panel of experts, and there's 3 gentlemen. 2 are volunteers for our group. And then we're going to have a breakout section. For those who are not familiar with that, it's one of the highlights of our group, is we break up into 5 groups. And we have a leader for each one. Denny, raise your hand. You're going to be doing radiation. Gene's going to do hormone therapy or ADT. And then Chuck is going to do surgery, and he's going to be back over there. And Bill Manning will do active surveillance. So after our 3 speakers, we're going to break up, and you drift off into the quadrant that you want. And if you're a newcomer and don't know what you want or have some questions, I'll be down in front. Okay, now let's, Gene, you ready?
Thanks, George. Again, George, thanks for what you do. Since I backed away from a lot of things I did, George basically does all the organization of the meetings and speakers and so forth. That's a lot of work, and we appreciate what you do. Quick notes. Those of you that haven't already registered, the Prostate Cancer Research Institute seminar is coming up on the 8th through the 10th of September. And out there on the freebie table is the Prostate Insights, which is a newsletter put out by PCRI. So the newest issue is out there. I also was able to finally replenish our supply of the book that's gotten pretty popular, even though it's really, really old. It's by Dr. Stephen Strum, who was, I think, one of the originators of PCRI. Since retired and only does special treatments. He lives in Oregon, Stephen Strum. It's called Primer on Prostate Cancer. And it the way it's presented, it still applies, even though there's been an awful lot of things developed since he wrote that book. Also, I got a copy of the latest. They have a mid-year conference at PCRI, and I got a copy of their DVD to here that you can check out. I don't get a lot of copies of it. The newsletter that so many of you looked for today wasn't there because somebody forgot to run them. However, you can always go on the website and open it up on the website. There's a button there that says newsletters, and you can click on that and you'll get the newsletter. That's all I got for today. Enjoy and learn.
Okay, you see the 3 names there, and what they're going to do is they have their own PowerPoint, and they're going to walk you through. They're going to have their own self-introduction, who they are and what they do. And we're going to hold the questions, maybe allow 1 or 2 for each speaker, but then open it up to questions to ask the 3 members simultaneously. And the first one up is Steve. He does he's done his own PowerPoint, and really great. And he's got a wonderful story. And Steve, would you get forward here? Thanks for volunteering.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes, which one's yours? My case history. So I'm going to try and be brief. I'm going to try and be brief and describe my how I started, found out I had prostate cancer, and the various phases of my case history. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm currently 71. I live in Rancho Penasquitos. I'm an aerospace engineer, so you may notice a lot of numbers and stuff on my presentation because that's what I do. And right now, my cancer, after complete local treatment, is metastatic, but it's still castrate sensitive, and my PSA is around 0.16. My biopsy on the full gland when I had surgery was Gleason 9, and I'm now stage 4. And my current treatment is ADT, Lupron with Zytiga. And actually, I feel pretty good right now. I get hot flashes from the ADT and a little fatigue. My workouts are harder. One of the things that I've done since I retired is work out at the gym, try and keep my bone density up and my muscle mass. All the doctors advise that. Also, I've reduced my weight some. So this is the history in a nutshell of my PSA. I did it on a log scale, so because after I had the surgery, which was right about here, when I went on treatment, now it's down here in the range of 0.01 to 1. But when you've still got a prostate, the normal range is from 1 to 4, which right here is when I had my first biopsy, and that was fun. And then my second biopsy, I was on active surveillance here. And then I went on full ADT, then surgery, and then radiation. And now I'm on ADT. So this shows the history from when I started at age 60. I decided I needed to get a regular physician, and I told him I had BPH and had some urinary problems. So he put me on every year he was going to test me for PSA. So I had a 1.9, then 2.5, then 3.0. You can see a not good trend here. And finally, in 2012, I had a 4.2. So my doctor says, well, you got to go see the urologist. So I went and saw the urologist, got my first biopsy, and I'll tell you about that. And then 2 years later, I had my second biopsy, and that was bad news. So this summarizes what I just said. I had up through age 60 in my late 50s. I had frequent urination and BPH. I couldn't sit through long meetings without a break. And then in 2012, my PSA was the first time greater than 4, which was the threshold for saying there's something wrong there. It was 4.2. So the urologist did a DRE, which just this little cartoon down here, invading my personal space. And he says, well, I can't feel anything, but you're still above the limit, so we're going to give you a biopsy. Little did I know what a biopsy entailed. This is a picture of what they do in the biopsy. They stick this thing up your rear passage, and they have a ultrasound probe and a biopsy gun that fires needles through the side of your intestine into your prostate, and it hurts like hell, really. I mean, I've talked to people about this, and most guys try and man up and say, oh, it hurts a little bit, you know. Baloney is right. But this is serious because, you know, a biopsy is an important thing to tell when something is really going wrong. You have to know that there's cancer in there. I think the urologists need to get their act together and figure out that this thing hurts and we better use some serious anesthesia on it. The other thing is that I think that this is inherently a risky business because you're perforating the side of the rectum, and there's all kinds of blood leakage and infection chance there. They tell me that there's another way that they can do this, where they, instead of going through the anal passage, they go through the bottom pass between your legs, and that has less chance of infection. Anyway, I had a course of antibiotics, and the result of this first PSA and DRE and biopsy was 1 core out of 12 had a 3+3 Gleason. So I said, gee, that doesn't really sound serious. I mean, it sounds like I ought to pay attention, but I went online, of course, and I found this group here, plus a lot of other stuff online about this, and looked up the 3+3 Gleason, and then they said, well, that's barely cancer. I mean, it's really, and now they're saying, well, maybe it's not really, shouldn't be called cancer. So I said, I'm not going to, the doctor says, the urologist wants to refer me to a surgeon or a radiation. They sent me over to talk to Rossi at Proton Center because they were trying to fund that. And I mean, he said, I don't really think you need proton treatment, but my boss says I got to refer patients over there. So I did some research. I went to a couple IPCSG meetings, and I decided to go on active surveillance. The problem with active surveillance is the doctor that you're dealing with and the institution need to be committed to active surveillance. They need to get you scheduled in to have periodic checks. Also, I think this has some relation to the biopsy problems, is they don't want to do biopsies as frequently because of all the pain and risk of infection and damage. I think if you listen to what Bernadette said at the last meeting, a multi-parametric MRI or imagery would be a much better way of tracking without taking all the risks of a biopsy. And also, it wouldn't drive people away because a lot of guys, they get that kick in the ass from the first biopsy, and they say, well, I think I'll just take my risk with the cancer. So after gradual increase, my PSE reached 7.7, and I went in, and the doc says, uh-oh, did the DRE, and he found a nodule. And I had a full-blown 4+ floor Gleason with full gland involvement. And I said, well, how did it get so high so quick? I thought I was being surveilled and you were checking. And, well, then they did an MRI, and they found that there were capsule extensions. But they also did a bone scan, and they said, no bone scan. So this is what my data from the biopsy looks like. This is the cross-section of the prostate, and I got this off online when I was doing my research. And I mean, the pathology report that you get just lists all these places, and it gives you a Gleason score. And what I've done here is I've plotted it so that, like, the apex, which is the bottom, down to the base, so that's up, down, and this is right, left. So you can see the whole right side of my prostate was Gleason 8. Actually, this Gleason 6 over here of the left, on the left side, that's where the original core on my first biopsy was. So it was still 6, but somehow this whole other area had developed into a full-blown cancer. And this shows the percentage of each core that was cancerous. So you can see that 90%, 95%, that's bad. So I considered radiation, surgery. I went to talk to Dr. Rossi. He was very nice, but I wanted somebody that was an experienced surgeon that did lots of surgeries. And so I selected Dr. Chris Kane over at UCSD after doing some talking and some research. And I got a robotic prostatectomy. It didn't go anything like this, luckily. But before they did the surgery, they wanted to get the PSA down, so they put me on Lupron. And they wanted the biopsy scars to heal. Now, this would be another reason why this frequent biopsy might be a problem, because, I mean, 6 months is a long time to wait to do surgery when you look at how fast my PSA was going up. And that may have made the difference between getting it with the surgery and missing enough so that it's still around. So anyway, I went in for surgery. I went in on the morning of one day, had the surgery in the afternoon, spent the night in the hospital, and got out the next afternoon. A few weeks later, I got the full pathology report, and I had positive margins, bad news. And my Gleason went from 4+4 to 4+5. And the full gland was infected. And I also had a deciphered genomic test, which indicated there was a high risk of recurrence, and it was aggressive. And some of the other effects of the surgery was because they cut out like about 2 inches of your urethra and pull your prostate up, or pull your penis up, you get shortening. And also because they tried to get these margins, I got full erectile dysfunction. I don't get any of that now. So anyway, other than that, the surgery was pretty effective. After 2 weeks, I got the catheter removed, and joy, I could control it. I had stocked up on Depends, and I was all ready for leakage, but Dr. Kane did a good job on that, and I had no problems with incontinence. And after 6 weeks, I got back in the gym. He was very adamant about waiting this long because he said he wanted to make sure all the stitches healed around the bladder and so forth. So that was good. So here's the events. Had the initial ADT after I was diagnosed. I took the first was a 1 month shot because I wanted to see how bad it was going, and I said, well, it's not so bad, so I took a 3-month shot after that. And I got my PSA way down to almost less than 0.01. And then I had the surgery. And then I came out of the surgery, and my first couple of measurements were undetectable. So I said, hooray, it's gone. But it wasn't. It starts coming back. It got up to about 0.18, 0.29. And so they wanted to do salvage radiation therapy. Now I said to them, you know, you already cut out the prostate, so it's probably somewhere else. How do you know where to shoot with your radiation? And they said, well, standard of care, Dr. Sandhu at UCSD, is we bombard the bed of the prostate. So I went through a full course of surgery, salvage radiation therapy. Didn't affect my PSA at all. And I'm convinced that it really didn't do anything. Anyway, after the radiation, my PSA kept going up. And so in January of this year, I got a C11 PET CT scan in Phoenix at PMI, Phoenix Medical Imaging, I think it's called, for Dr. Almeida. And the initial evaluation of the scan was, well, it looks like it's all localized to the pelvic region, so you might be a candidate for radiation and get it all down there. So I say, okay, I'll schedule up radiation therapy and see if I can get that. So I scheduled an appointment with a radiation therapist, Dr. Rossi, and give him the imagery that I got from Phoenix. He's worked with Dr. Almeida before, so he looked at the imagery report and said, well, the final pathology indicates that you have widespread metastatic lymph nodes that are affected, and so you're not a candidate for radiation. So I was very depressed after that, because I was thinking maybe I could zap it. So I went on full-blown ADT with back to UCSD, and they wanted to put me on just plain ADT, and they switched for some reason from Lupron to Trelstar. I don't know why, but anyway, at least my cancer is still responding to ADT, so my PSA is going down. This is a summary of my salvage radiation, and this is a little certificate you get on graduation day. And this is the scan. This is a copied off one of the DVDs you get from Phoenix PMI, and it was worth it to me, but it was kind of expensive. It was $3,000, and they said, well, of course you could get but it wouldn't be a full indication of what was going on in there. Okay, so now I'm on ADT. Well, I've had several rounds of ADT over the various phases of treatment, including ADT with surgery, with Lupron, and I've had the regular things. I watch TV and I'm sitting there and suddenly, hot flashes, and I get tired in the afternoon and early in the evening. And I also had it with my salvage radiation. And then when my PSA was rising, I went back to UCSD and they put me on 3-month Trelstar with no supplement. And I didn't want to just stay on plain ADT, because all the research that I've seen says it just slows it down. And with my cancer, I figure eventually it's going to come back, and when ADT doesn't work anymore, I'll be in real trouble. So I switched to prostate oncology specialists, Dr. Schultz and Dr. Lamb up in Marina del Rey. I got a bone density and a cardiac stress test before I went on full-term ADT, because bone density and cardiac effects are things you have to watch during ADT. And first I got on Lupron plus Casodex, and that wasn't too bad. But then last month I switched to Lupron and Zytiga. Lots of dollars for Zytiga. Zytiga is made by Johnson & Johnson, and they have a foundation that will support people who don't have insurance to get Zytiga, and they only have to pay $10 a month. But since I had insurance and I had a copay, they said I could afford the copay. But it's still a significant amount of money. It's the Zytiga without insurance cash price is $10,000 a month. And this is this paper that I looked at really summarizes the evidence as to why ADT plus Zytiga and prednisone is worth it, and it's worth it to me. I mean, I saved all my life, so I got enough money now I can afford this, but it's really going to be difficult for people that don't have the money. They tested it on over 2,000 men, and every one of them, all cohorts, it improved the survival rate. And it did have a few cardiac, vascular, and blood toxicity effects. This is the link to the paper. And here they broke it down, the effects from the Stampede and Latitude tests. These were reported at the American Society of Clinical Oncologists conference this last spring. And 1 would mean there's no difference. Just if it's greater than 1, its ADT plane is just fine. This shows that in just about every case with AAP plus ADT, you get significant differences. The only group that had slightly marginal result were for those greater than 75. So, conclusion, I'm keeping going to IPCSG. I'm keeping my records up to date. I'm keeping researching online and in books. And I keep fighting. And the bottom line I learned through all this process is it's up to me. And like Gene said, the doctors know lots of stuff, but they have lots of patients. So you have to be your own case manager. So I do lots of research, and I'm not ready for this guy yet.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I've got time for one question. Anybody got a burning question they want to ask? Or we can hold it for the panel. Okay, let's go to our next speaker. We got a question here?
I should know by now, but what is ADT? Is that for radiation treatment?
Androgen deprivation.
What's loosely called hormone therapy. What it does is injection or pills that shut down the testosterone or dihydrotestosterone. And it also shuts down a lot of other things, including can cause memory loss and fatigue, and it just slows you down. Others have no problem. About 15% have severe impact. I was one of those. Okay, next we have Bill Bailey, and Bill is the one that manages this whole table, and he has a very interesting perspective on his prostate cancer. Come forward, Bill.
Good morning. Good morning. Sun's not out yet, but we can pretend, right? My name is Bill Bailey, and I'm the one here that was selected by George to talk about somebody who has gone through surgery. Well, Steve has also, plus a whole bunch of other things. And as you'll see, I have a slightly different approach to the way I'm going to present the same kind of information to you. And I think it's going to complement what Steve did. Outstanding job, Steve, on all that detail. I don't know. You know, this proves that engineers are not all the same. You're an aerospace engineer, and I'm a software engineer by background. And I thought I took really good notes all the way through my prostate cancer thing and charts and everything. I've never seen anything done as well as you did. My compliments. It was really good. I'm 73 years old, live in Rancho Bernardo, and my vocation, well, my title is I'm semi-retired and as a consultant of corporate databases. I'm a software guy, and I'm a past CIO. You know what that is? Chief Information Officer, fancy name for IT executive. So I came up through software development in my life, and had a really nice career. I don't consider it quite over yet, I hope. I'm divorced since 1989. I have 2 grown children, and I love to keep active, and I really do when my health allows me to. I feel really good right now. I'll give you a recap of in a second. I'm not back to tennis or hiking or swimming yet. I'm a musician, I'm a singer. I'm in a number of singing groups. And I fiddle around with computing and software on the side, which I just love to do. But because everybody knows that, my whole neighborhood comes over and has me help them. And it's getting a little old. I'm going to start putting a change collector out there, you know, or bills maybe. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer in November of 2012. I think that's when Steve's adventure started. August. Same year, though. I had surgery quite a few months later, 7 months later, in April of 2013. That's total prostatectomy. That's all they do these days. Don't do a partial, as you probably know. And, unlike Steve, from prostate cancer, I've had no requirement for any further treatment. Since that surgery, every 3 months they did a PSA at first, and then I went to every 6 months, and it's never been higher than 0.02. And so it bounces between 0.01, well, negligible. It's negligible every single time, and still is. And but I'm keeping it up thanks to this group. I don't think I would have done that had I not been in this group, and I'm going to be thanking them a number of times. You're going to hope you don't get tired of me saying that. My purpose and approach is going to, like I said, is going to vary from Steve's approach. He did a detailed clinical study of his adventure, and I'm going to give you a timeline from detection to post-treatment, you know, in the standard timeline, more like a project manager would. So in addition to showing you some of the medical and clinical data that Steve showed, I have summarized that to what was meaningful to me. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to emphasize the emotional impact. That is what I went through. This is something that a lot of people, especially men, do not like to talk about. Men don't, ladies that are here, how many of you feel that men don't talk about their feelings very often? How many of you feel, including the men, feel that if you were able to talk about your feelings, it would help you? Hey, that's more hands than I thought. Yeah. You know what? I learned this through the process of going through this disease in spades. I really did, and I hope to share some meaningful things to which you can relate. What about this emotional impact? Well, when we're going through this process, and Steve describes just the biopsy part of it alone, you're going to experience a whole lot of feelings. And I've had enough therapy stemming from my divorce, I got with a fantastic marriage and family counselor. Didn't save my marriage, but boy, I carried on with him, and he is now one of my very, very, very close friends. I wish he was around here, but he's in Florida now. But he is a very good friend of mine, and he was also a minister at one point. But more important than that, he's a very personal coach, is what I was trying to get to. And he said that, Bill, you have to treat these new experiences as an opportunity to learn, and actually as an adventure. I said, you got to be nuts. This is real scary stuff. How am I supposed to feel like it's an adventure? And he just repeated that enough times that you'll see how I kind of took that, and by the time I finished my process, I was fully on board with turning everything around in a positive light. And I'll show you how I did that. Hope you can relate to it. So what I'd like to do now is give you just a little bit of background leading up to the detection of prostate cancer and going all the way back to my childhood. For all my life, since age 16, I've had a dread of getting any form of cancer. And the reason was, at age 16, my father died of lung cancer, and it was in the worst way. Talk about radical surgery. You know, back in 1960, they start here, and they cut all the way around the back. And then they remove it, and then they open that up, and they take out a whole lung, and in his case, a part of the right one. You know how long that takes to heal? I mean, the surgery was much, much more crude back then, totally different. And I was the oldest of 3 children. I ended up being one of his primary caretakers. Every night he would bend over the dining room table, and I would rub his back because of the scar, the tremendous scar. He had tremendous pain all the way through. And he did nothing but get worse over the period of almost a year and a half, and finally died. That made a severe impact on me. It just scared the whoop-a-doo out of me. And I carried that fear silently around with me all my life, trying to avoid anything having to do with cancer. I mean, I love to read, I love to do research, but I would not look at any kind of clinical journals or anything. I just didn't want to know anything about it. The fear was so deep. I think maybe some other people go through that kind of thing and never tell anybody that they're deathly afraid of cancer. Then, as an adult, one of the things that I avoided was PSA tests. And there were years that went by that I didn't get any, even after I was advised to do it. And all the way up to age 68, 5 years ago, the fear of prostate cancer it prevailed over my life. My cardiologist was the only one that was seeing me every 6 months at that point because of a minor heart attack that I had 20 years ago. And he was seeing me every 6 months just to check up on me, and he was just really urging me to get a PSA test as I was getting older. And he finally convinced me. He convinced me at a time when I was making up these imaginary connections of cancer to what was going on. I was big into bike riding at the time. My friend and I would put on about 80 miles a week. He's still riding. He's 73 also. He's still riding. He does 110 miles a week. And I'm not riding at all anymore. But back then in 2012, I couldn't go any distance because the bicycle seat was hurting down there. And what do you think my mind was doing? It's prostate cancer. I know it is. I am not going to get it checked out. I mean, what kind of logic is that? I'm going to resist. But my cardiologist insisted. In fact, the day he said, I'm going to follow up to see whether you get this, and I want you in there this week. So I went in the day after that, and I got a PSA test. And Friday evening, I was bike riding, as a matter of fact, and he was home from work. He never does this. He called me. He says, I got the PSA results back. He says, because this was the call I didn't want to get, right? He said, your preliminary PSA rating is 9.5. I said, is that high? Well, almost all of you know. You know, what's the threshold? 4, right? I think they tried to keep everybody under 4, and especially in my age, it's pretty old. 68. I mean, he was not. There was no levity in his voice. He was just talking calmly. He says, "I think you ought to. I'm going to give you the name of a urologist, and I want you to see him Monday morning." Well, I didn't see him Monday morning, but I did follow what he was going to say. I set it up as soon as I could, and I didn't know this guy from Adam. And he said, also, I'm going to order another PSA for you because sometimes we get a false reading. And the urologist is going to want that new reading anyway. And he got another one, and I'll just go over that part. So now let's get into the timeline. My first timeline takes us through the end of October, November, and December of 2012. Detection. That's what I just talked about. Consider myself detected. Here was the second PSA test. Which one do you think they took, the 9.5 or they took this one? Worst case scenario. I'll just tell you right now that before I got too long into the process, after I got a biopsy, they did one more PSA test somewhere in January, February, which I'm going ahead a little bit from my timeline. They did another one. It was 19.5. What is happening? Yeah. The problem was I hadn't had a PSA checkup for 3 or 4 years before that one, the first one. Scary, huh? Then I saw the urologist, and right off the bat, I didn't like the guy. I didn't. I'm just telling you the truth, and I'm telling you the truth. All my feelings, I'm kind of out here on a limb. I'm exposing myself here. I'm exposing some of my weaknesses, so maybe you can relate better. And I didn't like him because he didn't communicate well, and he was dry, and he showed no compassion whatsoever. So the fact that he couldn't communicate well was the one thing that I really didn't like, and he still to this day probably doesn't communicate well. I don't see him anymore, but he doesn't explain things all the way out. So when I ask him questions, he goes on to something else. It's just a mannerism that wasn't very appealing to me. So here is my first. I took important point. How many of you have ever written a journal, daily journal of your feelings? Yeah, hardly anybody does. But you know what? This therapist that I told you about, he instilled that in me a long, long time ago. So I just told myself, when I'm going through this, I'm going to keep a detailed journal of what I'm feeling about. And I'll tell you why that's important. So that's how I can go back and I can check what I felt like on every single day that I was going through this. So I summarized them here. I had of those different feelings that you can experience. I had fear and anxiety from where I was at this point. It was very early in the process. And at detection, a PSA of 9.5 corrected to 14.5, which is all we knew at that point, was scary high. There was nobody that was contradicting that. What is that? Okay. I was concerned about the capability of the urologist. Just the sheer capability. Why? Because I asked around about him, and I got some negative feedback. Yet my insurance wouldn't easily allow me to go to someone else at that point. It's because you're kind of stuck. You've been in those kinds of places before. Nor am I able to get referred to one of the stellar medical people up in Marina del Rey. Those doctors, at least my insurance back then would not have covered it. So I'm stuck. And then I did not particularly like the urologist manner of communication. I talked about that already. So I'm not having a good feeling about this, but I'm not too sure what to do about it. Okay. Then we got into the biopsy. Oh, he did the DRE, and he said, yes, I do feel something on the first try. He said, yeah, I do feel something, and we're going to have to do a biopsy. And he didn't give me much time. I know there's a space between the arrows there, but it was really about a little over a week. And I got in to see the biopsy, and I think your description's pretty accurate there, Steve, about the kind of experience. I had a friend drive me to, she was the first, it was the first time that she had ever taken me to to a medical appointment. And of all the medical appointments, I would wish someone else would have driven me, because she was waiting in the waiting room and she could hear the cries coming out from the other room. No, I wasn't crying. I think the nurse was crying. No, it was really a bad situation. But it was over with quickly, and I didn't have any pain afterwards. But I'll just go on. Biopsy results. And those came within a couple days. And this urologist sat me down, and he had taken, and I was wrong when I talked to you, George. He took 13 cores, not 12, but 13. I don't know why. But only 6 of those had cancer in them. So that's less than 50%, and that's a big deal. Because if it's higher than 50%, the way it works is it's an indicator that you have cancer on both sides of the prostate. And that increases the chance that it's spread beyond the prostate wall. Got that right, do I? Okay. See what I've learned? I've only been coming here about 7 years. But I think the stage is T2B. I can't be absolutely certain about that, but I don't think that's going to bother anything. But if it's a C, I don't know. And if I were Steve, I would know this cold. That one I'm not too sure of. Okay, now I'm really confused. And I've also got some fear still. Because all this was so new to me, I didn't know what was up. And it sounded very, very serious. I thought I was in big trouble. Even though, he said, it's an intermediate level of cancer. Because my Gleason score, I'm sorry, did I show my Gleason score? Oh, yeah, my Gleason score was 7, a 4.3. That's on the borderline of being very serious, because if it's 4.4, of course, then it's 8, and 8, it puts you in a whole new category. Am I right about that? And then you're off in the big time. So I was confused about the Gleason scoring. I didn't know how that worked. And right then and there, I vowed to read up on all new terms and jargon. When we talk about jargon, somebody asked over here what ADT was. There are a whole bunch of terms that we tend to throw out here, because we're used to throwing them out. I'm not, but these guys are. And I want to tell you, there are plenty of sources plenty of glossaries around. And in fact, I think it's still true that the website, our own website, has a list of terms. And it's cross-referenced. So you can go there and get, if you write down the term while you're in here and go back and check out our website online, and you'll get straightened out on those terms. And then it's a start anyway. So I was also confused about the mixed signals I was getting from the urologist. He said it was moderate severity at a Gleason score of 7. Yet he told me moderate to aggressive is what he said. Moderate to aggressive. Those were his words. Yet he told me I had plenty of time, in terms of months, to determine whether I was going to have surgery or radiation, which were the only 2 options made available to me, but several forms of radiation I could have had, or just the prostatectomy. So that's kind of a mixed signal, and that confused the crap out of me. So I was determined to find out some information. Now, one of the causes of fear, this is a good time to get into this, one of the causes of fear everybody knows is a lack of information. So the reason I was so afraid, and of course I'm telling you that all these fears from all over the years and my father and all that kind of stuff, that's still in there, right? Because I had no way to deal with it, and I wasn't addressing it, I wasn't taking care of it. But those were exacerbated by the fact that I knew nothing about what was going on. And the good news is that this whole presentation is about the more you find out what's going on about your case, you may not be able to change where it's going, but just the fact that you know what's going on about yourself will reduce the fear, I promise. It will reduce the fear. If you do nothing else, get answers to this thing. What's really happening? That's why, Steve, I'll bet, I don't know how you manage with all that stuff going on, but I think that that's part of it. All the research that you do, it gives you a bit of control. Now, I tell you this like I'm an expert. I'm the one that just never talked about my feelings. My wife, it wasn't one of the reasons for the divorce in '89, but she says, you've just got to be able to talk about your feelings. And I didn't get it. I didn't get it that it would have helped me to be able to talk about my feelings. And it will help you through this, I think. Oh, that's a dupe. Okay. Now, at this point, you know what? I forgot to say something before we leave the detection part of it. Did you know, I'm trying to lighten it up a little bit because that chart was really heavy stuff. Did you know that this is true? A dog with a sense of smell can detect prostate cancer in a man up to 94% accuracy. Can you believe that? That is true. Now, cats can do that too. Cats can do that too, but they won't. They'd rather see you die. Okay. The initial focus areas, I have one more for you toward the end. Don't go to sleep too long. The initial focus areas for my research, well, what was had I just gone through? The biopsy and the pathology process. How do they determine what it is they end up telling you? That is really important to find out. I'm going to give you some sources that work for me, and there are plenty of sources available on this stuff, believe me. And any one of us can point you to some books and publications that will help you. Things like the core samples, the accuracy of their conclusion. I mean, he just concluded that it was a 7, and that means this, and you got so many months to find really? I want to know the details behind that, and I did, eventually. The Gleason scoring, and also the significance of the Gleason to the patient. That Gleason score is the measurement of the direction that you need to go in your treatment. There's no two ways about it. Plus a lot of other nuanced type things that go around it. That stage that I listed, that's also an indicator. But the Gleason score is something you really need to understand. And then what are the criteria for selecting a treatment path? I have to tell you that I thought it was clear that my urologist was favoring surgery. I know it's hard to believe, right? It's hard. Why is that true, guys? Why is that true? He's a surgeon. Right. He's not allowed to tell me, he's trying to look like he's impartial. Forget it. So you got to get out your Invasion of the Prostate Snatchers book and shove it in his face. No, you just have to keep an open mind. And I did. I started reading what these guys recommended. I did read that Invasion of the Prostate Snatchers, and I'm going to recommend that in a minute. And so what are the what are the criteria for selecting? I didn't know what they were, and I couldn't get a straight answer for him. So I started researching that. And it was true. I did have a number of months to make up my mind. I'm not sure that all those months were a good thing, because it was growing. Cancer never sleeps, not even at night, right? So the excellent sources of info, first of all, I listed all by itself and right up front. This group, because I started coming here right after my biopsy when I was really, really confused. And Gene's initial talk to me on the phone, you've all been called by Gene, right? Was invaluable to me. Just the initial steps, what I need to do and all that kind of stuff. That, and I started attending regularly, along with a friend who brought me, and he was much further along. I don't have time to go over that. So that was the first thing. Attend the meetings because you get a lot out of it. And use the meetings to network with other people here. And I think these guys do a great job of setting up the opportunity for you to network. The DVDs of past IPCSG sessions and also conferences. You know, we have, here's 2016 Cancer Conference. Did anybody here borrow this one and look at it? This is fantastic. It's the whole conference on 2 DVDs. And I recommend that you see that because they really cover the subject really well. I haven't gone to a conference yet myself, but I don't feel I need to if I can get a DVD of it. I mean, it's really good. Okay, and then white papers. A friend of mine, we don't have the Johns Hopkins white papers here on prostate cancer yet anyway. You have to order them specifically from Johns Hopkins in Maryland. But a friend of mine loaned me his. What'd you say? Somebody say something? A friend of mine loaned me his, and this is a great publication. Let me see. I'll come back to this slide. Happening. Oh, yeah. I just inserted this because I couldn't find mine. I think I loaned it out and don't know who I loaned it to. But this is what it looks like. It's a Johns Hopkins white paper on prostate disorder. And what I like about this one is the pictures. Steve showed some great pictures of the internal. This has a whole slew of pictures from every angle. And they're really well drawn, and they're very, very well explained. And talk about glossary of terms. This one has it too. I just felt like I was starting to get a grasp on what was going on. You know? How do I go up? Yeah. Okay, 5 minutes. That's good. I think. Okay. The other one is Invasion of the Prostate Snatchers. It's over here on the table for sale. And this is still very valid. I think it's 2014 is the latest, but it's still very, very applicable. But it's more applicable when you're in the early stages. You haven't made a decision yet about your treatment, because it says, oh, everybody's telling you surgery. Hold on, check out the other options, and it really spells that out real well. This was a great book for me. And Gene already mentioned the primer on prostate cancer by Strum. I haven't read that one, but it's supposed to be good, although very, very technical and detailed. So that would apply to some of you. Okay. My support system. And this is very important. In feeling better about where you are, no matter what the situation may be, this group here gives invaluable advice on being your own case manager and how to do that. That's what every meeting's about. And then networking. You get to talk with men with similar issues and find somebody that's very close to you in the prognosis and diagnosis. And of course, the obvious ones. I'm just talking about myself now. My family members, I'm divorced, but what supplements? My kids are old enough now that they're supporting me, and I didn't want them to get involved in this at all, but they wanted to. So I ended up leaning on them for the first time in my life. I guess more of that is coming. But even though I am not married, I have this amazing core group of friends, and I hope you guys have something similar to this. I belong to a group of friends who've been around been together for 28 years. We're all single, men and women. We go everywhere together, and what's more important, anytime anybody gets sick or anything, all the rest of us provide support, and really, really tight support. So I'm very, very lucky that I have these friends. Anytime I need a ride someplace, 3 of them want to take me on the same day. It's just great. And it works the other way, too. And then that therapist I talked about, but you may also have a counselor of some kind, or a minister or a priest. Really good idea to tell them. Just insist that you meet with them and tell them what's going on with you. And then other groups. In my case, I belong to 3 singing groups, and I told them all in a meeting like this. Each one of them in a meeting like this. One of them has 60 people. I told them all what's going on with me. I don't mean all the gruesome details. Certainly not the biopsy, but you get my point. And I encourage you to do that, even though it's difficult for men to do this. I better get to this other timeline really quick. Okay, next step was I consulted with a surgeon. I didn't like him much either. He was cold. He was cold. He was arrogant. He had an understudy with him. Is it okay if I bring my understudy here? I'm just meeting you. Why do you want to bring in an understudy? And he was actually showing off to the understudy. I think that's true. I really do. I thought it at first. I said, no, Bill, you're just... He was. And, I was like second on his list. So he explained how great he was. He had done 400 and some robotic prostatectomies. Really? Okay. I just don't like you. No. But so I put that on the back burner, the surgery. I did. You know why? Because my first 2 consults with the radiologist, this guy was completely opposite. He bounces into the room. How you doing today? He's like a salesperson. How you doing today? He sits down. He leans back. He wants to know all about me. I like that. And he knows his stuff. He came well recommended. Anyway, totally good experience. So big difference between those 2. So here is anxiety on one hand, and some calming, because the radiologist made me feel comfortable in his care. And he just pretended like, he just kind of went along like, oh, it's going to be radiation, and I'm going to be the one taking care of you. That's the way he kind of handled it. So I was starting to think that way. And it was good. It was calming. So I found the surgeon abrupt and short on information, and I couldn't relate to him. And the radiologist was friendly, informative, and I felt a lot more comfortable. Okay. Then toward late January, I had a whole bunch of MRIs and CT scans, 3 or 4. All of them to tell the radiologist where the cancer was for focusing in on the tumor. And those were okay. No sweat. I'm still doing my research, so I'm feeling better. And the full body, and then I was scheduled for a full body. This scared me. When I saw the condition of the patients getting the full body scan for all types of cancer, and I knew that if they found a PT, it's full body from head to toe, so they can find any form of cancer anywhere in your body with a PT scan, PET scan. And I was afraid of that, the results of that, but it came back negative, totally negative, which turned out to be a very, very positive thing. That set me free from a lot of the fears that I had all my life. That one right there. Okay. The MRIs were not worrisome for radiation. They were for radiation purposes, and I was very anxious about the PET scan and brought back fears of other possible cancers. Okay, and then here's the final timeline. The key decisions, the discussions. I had one key discussion with a friend of a friend who was a retired prostate cancer surgeon living in Phoenix. I didn't know this guy, but he spent 50 minutes on the phone with me, and he went over all of the decision criteria that I had gathered so far. He was so nice. I asked him all kinds of questions, and he said, I think in your case, Bill, you've got more evidence that you ought to have the prostatectomy. He says, do you agree with that? And I said, yes, except I have a problem. I just have a chemistry problem with the surgeon. He said, listen, we both looked at his track record. He has excellent results from the surgery. You're not here to make friends with your surgeon. You're here to get the best care for yourself with the constraints that you have to work with. You can't go to the best surgeon in the world, but we've got to get this done. And I think it's been too long that you haven't scheduled this. So he said, 10 minutes after that, I hung up the phone and I called my surgeon's office and scheduled the prostatectomy, and I had it a week and a half later. I was feeling so good about that whole process. Do you get this, what I'm saying here about all the things I was doing to take care of myself and how I'm feeling better and better and better? Nothing else has changed. It's still a Gleason 7. I still could die, but I feel so much better and I had so much less fear. Is this helping you guys? I hope so. Okay, so I had the total radical on April 13th, 2013. And by May, I was resuming normal activities with a full recovery and haven't had any trace of PSA increase since then. That's pretty good news. The surgery itself was a breeze. I was released the next morning, no pain at all through the whole process. It was like Star Trek in the new Palomar Hospital in San Marcos. I couldn't believe that place. They made me feel so comfortable. I thought I was going to run into Dr. Spock there for a while. Have you seen a robotic surgical setup? It's just incredible. There are surgeons way across the room from you. The side effects, though, look at this. This is the first time I mentioned this. Steve mentioned this. I did have, and I was a little bit shocked, but not really. I did have ED and incontinence with the possibility that I wasn't going to be able to treat either one of those for the rest of my days. And I have to tell you, I still have them. But I think I can treat at least one of them when I get free from the current disease that I'm facing. And I'll tell you about in a minute. But I just haven't had time between different ailments. So I'm hoping I can do something about that. It was a downer at the time, but I'm hopeful. And then otherwise, excellent outlook and prognosis. Yeah, I see you.
1 minute.
Okay, my conclusion. I felt that surgery was the best decision for me at the time, weighing all the information I had obtained. I am very glad I kept a journal of my emotions and mood throughout the process. It helped my positive attitude. Because every night I would go home and have to write the journal and I'd have to think about how I was feeling when I wrote it. And my attitude was good. My friends told me so. And my doctors told me so. My concerns, none except for living with or correcting possibly the side effects. I've mentioned that. Would I do it again? This will surprise you. No. Would I take that treatment again? No. But it's because medicine has changed so much since 2012 in the information. And I have friends who have gone through radiation treatment. They're perfectly fine. Their PSA is level. And they don't have these side effects. So that's why I would do it. That's how I see the situation. I guess that's it, but I have another joke for you. George, can I? Just quickly. Man and his wife walk into the doctor's office, and the doctor talks to the man for a while and sends him out to the waiting room while he talks with the guy's wife. And brings the wife in, and he has a very, very serious disease. It's life-threatening. In fact, he's gonna die within 6 months. There is one, it's a mental and it's a physical thing. And the mental side is he needs to be perked up, and the only thing that has worked for other patients is if you agree to have sex with him every night for 6 months straight. And sometimes that just gives him the lift, and they pull out of it, and they're fine. But that's, it's a chance. But that's what will happen. She says, "Thank you very much for the information." She goes out to the waiting room, and her husband's sitting there, and jumps up and says, I can't stand this. What did the doctor say? She says, "He says you're going to die." The epilogue is that the same year that I was recovering from prostate cancer, I was diagnosed with what they thought with tumors in my liver and pancreas, and in the emergency room, and everybody was down-mouthed about it because they thought it was pancreatic cancer with liver involvement. For 7 weeks, they were working the diagnosis. And just before Thanksgiving on that same year, they called me and told me, we've done bone biopsies, we've done everything, and we are 90-some% sure, at least as sure as that cat, Did you get that? The cat? Okay. We're 98% sure that it is not liver or pancreatic cancer. It's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is eminently treatable, and we think you're going to be fine. And I went through 6 months of very regimented. You might know this, but there are extremely useful, great the regimen, chemo regimen that they're using now for most types of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, extremely successful, and I'm one of those. I went through it, and I'm now 4 years past the end of chemo, and in another year they're going to end, and no trace of the cancer anywhere, and they are already thinking that they're going to be calling me cured in another year. So. Thank you very much for your interest.
Okay, well, thank you, Bill. We have one more to go, but the highlight of what Bill was talking about was the emotional mental impact of this disease. And many doctors are not sensitive to that. And what I suggest is you talk about your emotional aspects, particularly if you're on one of these ADT things. Tell them that you feel fatigued and you feel depressed and so forth, because there are alternates to Lupron. I'm on Firmingon, and that's helped me greatly because I cannot deal with Lupron. So share those emotional concerns with your doctor. All right, Darrell, you ready? Here we go. And yeah. No.
I'm going to be reading this, so it's not going to be as personal as what we saw before, but I think I can pull it off. My name is Darrell Dixon. You are looking at a miracle. I am 77 years young. 45 of those years I was involved in the Dixon Ford dealership located in Oceanside and Carlsbad, from lot boy to vice president. I've lived in Oceanside 75 years, presently in a 1929 remodeled Spanish mission-style home. I collect art, books, and love the 3 A's: architecture, art, and automobiles. My kids call me a stuffaholic, and my wife threatens to take my keys if I continue my collecting. I am now retired, married to my most supportive wife, Lauren. Current status, my PSA 1.55 has been rising slightly over the last 3 or 4 months. My Gleason score, 4/3, the result of a 2011 biopsy. I am currently in a clinical trial with an immune therapy, Keytruda, at UCSD, yes, which seems to be going well. I have a tumor on my right adrenal gland, which was biopsied through the liver and determined to be prostate related. I currently feel wonderful and play tennis 3 times a week with minor knee issues. Is that from Keytruda, tennis, or old age? Excuse me. My journey began in 2011 while suffering heartburn and indigestion. My GP, Dr. Abraham, discovered lymphoma in my stomach area and also an elevated PSA. Thank you. He suggested Dr. Walker for a biopsy. Painful. And a Gleason score of 4/3. I chose to turn all my energies on my lymphoma. Chemo and radiation, whatever they suggested. My oncologist, Dr. Faria Siddiqui, took me through that marvelous journey. And about a 2-year process. Now it is time to deal with prostate. My PSA has been rising to approximately 17. I had been a regular visitor to our support group with active surveillance since 2011. And my wife and I had been looking for any and all possible solutions. Some of these included a trip to Biomedical Center in Tijuana with herbs, tinctures, and diet, and cannabis, Rick Simpson oil, Kangen water, etc. This search is still ongoing. In 2014, my PSA had been rising and I decided to radiate the prostate. No surgery for me. In preparation, shrinking the prostate with Lupron and Casodex. Dr. Kane, my urologist, and Dr. Muntz, my radiologist, was my team. Unfortunately, a bone scan showed a growth on my spine, T11 and T12. A biopsy proved that prostate cancer had metastasized, and this is a game changer. Radiation and surgery of prostate gland is off the table. Hormonal treatment of Lupron and Casodex seemed to be the obvious route. This lowered my PSA for about 18 months to 2 years. I regret not radiating sooner before it metastasized. I watched and waited too long. October 2015, we determined I might be a candidate for a clinical trial. Drugs of Xtandi, expensive, Zytiga, expensive, and prednisone. I was in that trial that had all 3 of those. Started in January of 2016 under Dr. Randall at UCSD. During this trial, I told my doctor I felt that I was aging rapidly. 1 month into the trial, I developed a tumor in my right clavicle lymph node, just a small thing about pea size. Barely noticeable. Within 3 months, it was the size of a golf ball. Biopsy showed it to be prostate related, but differentiated, which means it mutated. They called this an occurrence. I was dropped from the clinical trial on April of 2016 and was prescribed Xtandi by itself. I stopped Zytiga and was weaned off of prednisone. The tumor was now the size of a tennis ball. I had a trip planned at the end of June, so Dr. Muntz radiated the mass with 13 treatments. Within 2 months, the tumor shrunk and disappeared. About this time, a tennis friend, a Dr. Andrew Perry of Anti-Cancer, offered to take biopsy samples of my medical research and infect mice with my cancer to determine what drugs would cure it. This materialized at a future operation. July 11th, 2016, I went to visit Dr. Almeida in Phoenix, Arizona, and did a C11 scan with really good results, and it was a very enlightening experience. I'd recommend it for anybody. At one of our meetings here, I met Dr. Dado, who was in charge of Provenge, an immune therapy through Genesis. This had been FDA approved, and why not give it a try? This process filters your white blood cells, sends them to a clinic that fortifies them with protein, then 3 days later returns them to your body. Well, this didn't show any immediate results, but here's where the miracle comes in. January 17th of this year, on a Tuesday, I had a regular PET scan that was done every 4 or 5 months following my lymphoma of 2011. They all showed my lymphoma gone. The next day, Wednesday, the 18th, at 10:30 a.m., I am backing into my driveway coming home from tennis. I see my wife on the phone at the end of the driveway, waving her arms to get my attention. She is talking to my oncologist, Dr. Zytiga. A Dr. Smitter, who had read my PET scan, saw something he did not like and called Dr. Zytiga. So Dr. Zytiga called me that very morning and tells my wife, get him to emergency now and don't let him drive. This got my attention. Tri-City emergency room, still in my sweaty tennis clothes. I spent the day and night and had an MRI of my brain and other tests. That night, I am being interviewed by a large-fingered surgeon with this MRI photo in his large hands. Okay, so this is a tumor. I have a tumor the size of a ping pong ball behind my right eye. I didn't have any physical feelings on this, but obviously this is very serious. And thanks to my doctor, Zytiga, she gets me transferred. Now I'm out of place here, guys. Due to the efforts of Dr. Zytiga, Balboa Ambulance takes me to intensive care at UCSD, Thornton Hospital, Jacobs Wing. And you try to rest when you are awakened every 3 hours for tests. Friday, January 20th, my neurosurgeon, Dr. Pamela Jones, explains what she plans to do. I said, take out the bad and leave the memories. And I signed the release forms. I don't remember the operation, just asking my wife why she was crying as they wheeled me out for surgery. The operation went well. This MRI is after surgery. Tumor gone, and pathology in progress with my tennis friend from anti-cancer. January 21st and 22nd, I'm at the hospital and doing some rehabilitation therapy, special anti-seizure drugs, and many checks and tests. I had learned part of a new song and would sing it as I walked up and down the hallway. I felt great. January 23rd, I was released from the hospital. My mind was good. In fact, I woke up one morning and told my wife, my mind was pregnant with ideas, which I always have ideas. So possibly steroids. So slide 3. This is Darrell with 20 titanium staples. They were removed on January 30th, 2 days after my 77th birthday party. I then had radiation of the tumor bed by Dr. Hatangadi, brain radiation specialist at UCSD. Many MRIs, PET scans still ongoing monthly, showed brain tumor gone, but something on my adrenal gland. So February 24th, a biopsy was done on my adrenal gland, going through the liver to get to it, which again proved to be differentiated prostate cancer related, which means it mutated. So February 28th, and this is where I need that picture coming up here. It's of the young lady. There she is. Okay. I have my last appointment with Dr. Pamela Jones, 1 month and 8 days after my surgery. I presented my Dr. Jones a 20-pound marble snail. And on the bottom of it, this message: thank you for leaving the memories. So Dr. Jones, Snail, and Darrell, myself, and I sang her my song from The Wizard of Oz, If I Only Had a Brain. I could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain, and my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching. If I only had a brain. Thank you. I do have a postscript. And so I met with Dr. Zytiga yesterday morning to discuss the PET scans and MRIs that had been taken recently. The tumor on my adrenal gland is dead. The wicked witch is dead. No cancer lighting up in my body. So thank you again. Lessons learned. If you're watching and waiting, don't watch too long. Concerns, I'm still in a clinical trial, and it looks like this Keytruda has really been effective for the particular differentiated cancer that I have, and I'll be on that, and I'm being watched regularly, all sorts of tests, so it's a wonderful experience. I'm happy with everything that's gone along. I do watch my diet, eat a lot of fish, and as far as my spiritual growth, I am an artist, and I do projects around the home almost every day. And my wife has just been the most fantastic support anybody could ask for. Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic story, isn't it? Now let's open up to questions. We're running short of time here, so we're going to skip the breakout. And so let's open it up to questions for any of the three candidates. Yes, sir. What's a C11 scan? That's Dr. Almeida does it. It's a test that is uses an injection of a radioactive substance that is attracted to prostate cancer cells. So in contrast to an MRI and bone scan and traditional things like that, CT scan, they're looking at shades of gray. Oh, here's something very dark gray, that might be a tumor. C11, what it does, because it's specifically key to prostate cancer, and it will show in a red highlight zone where the cancer might be. If you have prostate cancer in your prostate, there'll be a big red blob. What it is really good for is finding cancer that has migrated into or metastasized into bone and soft tissue. So you see the highlights where it might be in some nodes and some bone and things like that. So it's very specific to that. And Dr. Armeda is a wonderful person, sits down with you and describes the whole thing. And that is a good targeted diagnostic that then he doesn't do treatment, but he would suggest where you might go. And so it's very good for having a targeted thing when you're concerned about where is this cancer now that's particularly recurred. Where we know your PSA is rising, but we can't find it. So he's the only one that does it in this region. There's a competing endeavor, which is choline C11. You can get it Mayo. It is not covered by insurance. It's still experimental. It costs $3,000. And guess who's going to be here in October? Dr. Almeida. So if you're interested in locating the disease elsewhere, come see that one. Yes, sir. Okay, a CD from Almeida Talk, yes, is available here, but we'd rather have them come here and hear an update of it. This is from last year. Question?
The first gentleman talked about therapy of ADT plus AAP. What was his terminology for AAP?
Well, androgen deprivation therapy restricts, it turns off the chemical signals that tell the testes to generate testosterone. That's generally done with Lupron or Trelstar or a couple other chemicals. AAP is abiraterone and prednisone, and it's a chemical that basically there are still, after Lupron works, there are still some places in the body which produce testosterone, which the theory is that it keeps the cancer cells alive. The cancer cells run on testosterone as stimulating their growth. Eventually, the cancer cells get so smart that they can manufacture their own testosterone, and then they're no longer castrate sensitive, and they keep going, and you have to go to chemo. But abiraterone interferes with that mechanism, and basically it gives you a complete elimination of testosterone in your body and the ability of those cells to convert the secondary testosterone chemical into the active chemical. So the idea is that it starves the cancer totally.
If you'd like to learn more about ADT, or what we loosely call hormone therapy, we have a CD on it, a DVD on it. That was a brilliant presentation 2 months ago from me. Okay. A question here.
I've heard some others here recommend going to a prostate cancer specialist, and they mentioned Dr. Rand up in the LA area. Is there a prostate cancer specialist that's closer in this area?
This is an interesting question because I have a urologist here because I get monthly Firmagon, but every 3 months I go up to see Dr. Lamb at the Marina del Rey. It's worth the trip by far. I mentioned emotion. Dr. Lamb's a wonderful guy, and after my last exam, he said, "How are you doing emotionally?" Wow, doctor never asked me that. And I said, "Well, I have a good spiritual program. Tell me about it," and so forth. So he's one that covers all the symptoms, mental, physical, and emotional. So I get that from him that I don't get from any others, but they're unique, unfortunately. We've been trying to get him to come down here and open an office, but no, there's not the equivalence of it. But we got some good urologists down here, but not, in my judgment, a specialist in prostate oncology. And those are the guys. They're very rare, and it's a treasure up there. It's well worth the trip.
George, UCSD has a prostate cancer team that includes 3 oncologists who specialize in prostate cancer.
Could you give me the names?
One of them is Dr. McKay. She came from Harvard to UCSD last year.
All right. Make note of that, guys. And another?
I think Dr. Zytiga, that the last presenter mentioned, also is on the prostate cancer team at UCSD.
No, Dr. Randall and Dr. Malad. This is part of their urological group. They're considered medical oncologists, but they're subspecialized in urological oncology with an emphasis on prostate cancer. But they are very, very busy. Not going to get any emotional side really with this group.
All right, thank you for that.
The other group that has is Genesis Healthcare, which we've heard mentioned. So they're the largest prostate cancer.
They're urologists.
Yeah. Yes, but you have some that are urological oncologists. So, so what you're really looking for is a urological oncologist.
Okay. All right, we got that. Okay, let me get over here. A question. Please say that again.
Check on my doctor's experience.
I have a doctor.
Okay.
He told me that he worked in 1990 something.
All right.
And I did check on his experience of doing surgery.
Good.
How do I check? Which way? Any way I can check?
I can't answer that. If you guys are talking and you can't hear the question, please repeat the question.
Is there a way that I can check on my doctor experience?
Is there a way that you what?
Check on the doctor's experience.
His track record.
Research the doctor.
Ask him.
He told me that he's been doing this in 1990 something, but I didn't know how many times has he worked on surgery, prostate surgery.
I can't help you on that. Now, a question here. Oh, you already had a question.
Has anybody on the Hopkins medical? That's something else I almost went.
All right, anybody go to Johns Hopkins?
But I can tell you something about it. They are running probably the most sensitive test for biochemical recurrence prostate cancer. There are comparative studies done now with that versus the gallium-68 PSMA. Both of these are much more sensitive than the C11 choline from Almeida. So please, you've got to look at the literature there on this. I mentioned it last time. Almeida's C11 is not targeted, to my knowledge. The others are PSMA prostate-specific membrane antigen. They attach a radiolabel, for example, gallium-68, and therefore it is targeted to all the cells that are expressing it. There's a competing technology that the woman who was here last time, Bernadette was involved with. This is run out of the Hopkins Kimmel Center. There are publications out on it now. When I looked, they were running clinical trials. There are more and more patients being doing it. They actually have it out-licensed to a company in Australia. So anybody who's looking at biochemical recurrence with rising PSA now, I would recommend those two diagnostics over anything out there. I had it done. Larry had it done. I had a lesion spotted, much, much, much smaller than any competing test. But the bad thing is, I then went for standard therapy anyway here at UCSD. Still ended up with ADT and radiation, but maybe I'll be lucky, and others, that since it was caught earlier as a recurrence, maybe we'll have better luck with the cure. But the diagnostic, an advanced, sensitive, and specific diagnostic is critical for us today.
All right. I was responding to the question about C11. Interesting that Dr. Almeida will be covering all these new technologies and so forth, because there's been a lot of advances in that. And right, the C11 is now not as good as other new technologies. The key question on some of these things is does your insurance cover it?
Okay, so if it's run under a clinical trial, and so most of the work was all done in Germany. There's a vast literature, but right now in California, Stanford and UCLA have it. UCLA has a very good group. They recruited in Dr. Iber from the original group in Munich, and he's there with them now. And the cost, when I looked out with the clinical trial, I think it was $2,400. You had to pay for the agent itself, but not for running the scan, which Medicare would pick up.
Yeah,
if you're allowing
DVDs, one of our previous meetings was, we got a brief from the guy from Germany who's doing that.
And then UCSF is probably running the best. That's Dr. Hope. He is the only one in the country who's running a dual modality simultaneous scan of the gallium-68 PET CT or a gallium-68 PET with a multi-parametric MRI, which is I had done, simultaneously. And you get a picture showing a fusion picture, and so you get a little bit better differentiation.
Okay, thank you. Larry asked me if we should have a breakout session on diagnostics, and you've encouraged me to do that. let's see what Almeida says in October, and we'll schedule something early next month on that. Question?
Well, actually, I just had a PSMA gallium 68 at UCSD.
Good.
And Medicare covered it all. Okay.
Good.
And that information came back to Dr. Randall, who's my current person at UCSD, and he referred me over to radiation because the results of that scan were such that they said I was clear except for metastasis on the L2 of my spine that was of a size they felt they could handle through a short course of radiation plus ADT that I just had last week, sort of putting all of those teams together.
So this is the cutting edge. You both did exactly the same thing.
Good. And your Medicare covered it all? Yes. Okay. Was that true for you, Larry? Yes. All right. That's good news. Okay. Hey, do we have questions for our speakers here? Questions for our speaker? Question.
So the speaker who rides bikes. Okay. Yeah. I was curious when you did your analysis. I have exactly the same case as you have. Okay, on the same timeline.
Why didn't you volunteer to do
with the same results? Okay, very positive results. And one of my considerations, when I talked to the people, I did most of my stuff at UCSD with Kay and Sandy, was they presented, I was 100% going to go with surgery, okay? If in doubt, cut it out, deal, all right? And I looked at the data, this is 4 years ago, okay? And the data says, if you're a certain age, I was 70, or just turning 70, okay? That there's a 10% chance you're going to be incontinent, or maybe 11, okay? And radiation, it's 1, all right? Results are almost the same. The surgery's slightly better at this time, okay? Not now, but that, slightly better.
The treatment results are the same.
Yeah. So I'm getting the same results with less incontinence.
Right.
I'm a golfer. I play golf 3-4 days a week. And I like to get out and get around and so forth. So that was a major factor in my decision, okay? The prostatectomy thing is over in 2 days, and it takes 2.5 months for radiation. And I have good proximity. I can get to the radiation facility in 20-25 minutes, so that's a factor too to put in. But I was curious, did you consider incontinence as a major factor in your decision?
Definitely a factor, and it was a factor, and I was given exactly the same probability that it would occur as a result of surgery, which was 10%, I believe. Incontinence we're talking about, not ED. Right. And I was given that, and so those are pretty good odds. I mean, that it would, that it would not be a factor. But what I didn't have time to say was my surgery was a lot longer. It took the surgeon a lot longer than he had planned, and it's a lot longer than most radical prostatectomies. Usually go 2 to 3 hours on the outside. Mine was almost 6 hours long, because after they removed they actually sucked that prostate out through a tube. Do you know that? Yeah. And then they send it to the path lab. But after they removed it, he went all around the prostate bed checking for hot spots, and I'm not sure that was the term he used, but anyway, he's looking for any possible random cells that might be still in the bed and all around that area, and taking nerves out as he went, And I think that's because of the extended surgery and his diligence at getting all the cancer, he couldn't avoid cutting the nerves, which affected the prostate. Which affected the incontinence.
After I got the results, the documentation, and I analyzed it and so forth, I was scheduled for surgery, and I said, okay, I'm going to switch and go to radiation. So I went back to my doctor, who happened to be Dr. Payne. He's got a big-time reputation for robotic surgery. and top guy, big ego, which I like in doctors, but okay, anyway, the point was I came back to him and I said, can you do better than 10%? And he said, no. So that was the final decision for me.
Yeah. Well, any statistics may seem small, like the 10. I mean, any statistic seems small until you're on the losing end of that statistic, right? Yeah.
Okay, a question for our speakers. Yes. Okay, I want to deal with the question for speakers.
On the same subject of incontinence, can I ask a question? Incontinence, you mentioned my urologist has suggested the implant as an option, an implant of I think it's a sphincter. And I'm wondering if anyone knows anything about it.
Yes, this gentleman here, Chuck. Okay, he has one and it works great. Any other question for our speakers? Yes.
For the first speaker, my husband, when he was diagnosed with the prostate cancer, they said according to the test that he has 10% of them who have this. It's a fast-growing cancer. How can they tell that?
Gleason score is one indication, and the other
4.5.
4.5. That's pretty aggressive. And the other one is the genomic test, like Decipher, and there are several other ones that will look at the genes of the cancer and tell you whether it's fast growing or likely to spread.
Thank you.
There's a big difference between a Gleason 3 cell and a Gleason 4. The DNA is different. The 4 is a high contrast difference. It's much more aggressive. So if you've got a 3+4 or a 4+3, it's recommended you get a second opinion on the biopsy because it may be a 4 or a 5. I have 5+4. There's a big difference between a 3 and so forth. So if you got a 3, you got a 6, boy, you're a great candidate for active surveillance.
We don't have copies of here, which has a brief, describes some of the genomic tests, which can give you a better indicator of the aggressiveness of the cancer.
Okay, any questions for our speakers? No, okay, quick.
Basically, when you were getting ready for treatment, they gave you an ADT treatment, okay, to shrink tumor size.
That seems to be common these days.
Yeah, it seems to be common in that area. Did they inform you about the flare issue? Okay.
I heard about it here.
Okay, the flare issue is if you get a fast rising PSA, I was going up from, I started at 6 and went to 20, okay, at a very fast time, and so did you. You went up quick, okay? The point is, when you get the ADT, the first thing that happens is a flare, and you can...
It may happen. It may happen. It varies. Okay. Any question for our speakers? All right, one question left.
Anybody, any of the three people consider seeds?
Any of our three consider seeds, radiation?
I think if I had gotten treatment after my first biopsy, when I had a localized to one core, and it was only 6, I would have used seeds if I had known about them, which I found out about later. But the urologists down here don't, and the radiologists do not discuss seeds very much.
Yes, they do. At UCSD, Dr. Ank is the one who's been a speaker here, and he's going to be here in January.
I can only talk about my
Right. Okay. But the thing about the seeds, it is generally viewed as one of the best solutions if you qualify and it's contained. However, it is a very skill-based treatment, so you need to have a radiation oncologist that really knows how to do that. Okay? Dr. Ank is the expert here that I know of. All right, you get one more question.
50,000 of them.
Yes.
So
Okay.
If you want to speak to our speakers, they're here and they're available, but we normally officially close at noon, but you can hang around for another 10 minutes, all right? Let's thank our speakers. See you next month.